Once you've killed the Chaos Guardian and you've got your fragments, etc., you may want to set up a Draconic Evolution reactor, which is this in front of us. It's quite simple to set up and can be simple or complex to keep stable. If you've seen, I would just Google it if I were you, Draconic Evolution Reactor Meltdown. It will destroy and vaporize absolutely everything in about a 300 block radius. Meaning, top tip here, before we get started, put it in another dimension. Put it in the Nether, use some sort of quantum entangler porter or something from a mod that can do cross-dimensional power. Put it in a compact machine. Put it in the Nether, put it in the End. Put it somewhere that is not your base. There is nothing that can stop this thing from vaporizing the land around it, unlike industrial craft and things like that, where there's certain blocks that will contain a nuclear meltdown in Draconic Evolution. So I just want to make that very, very clear. You know, make some backups, but I'm going to teach you how to use it safely, because this thing is crazy power generation. So you're going to need a few things. You're going to need a Draconic Reactor core, and before we get started, these are all made, of course, in fusion crafting. If you're making a Draconic Evolution reactor, at this point you should know how to use this, and you will have already killed the Chaos Dragon and got your Chaos Shards to make these items. So you're going to need 1 Draconic Reactor core. You're going to need 4 reactor stabilizers. You're going to need 2 flux gates and 1 reactor energy injector. I would also make a few levers, and well, that's about it really. So you can have the distance between the core and the stabilizer 5 blocks, which is what I think I've got here, but also up to 8 blocks away. Probably best if you just put it 8 blocks away, because this core will get bigger, and it's the more crazy it gets, the bigger it gets, and you want to be able to stabilize it with the stabilizers. So if they're a bit further away, it may be helpful for you. Okay, so you'll know if it works because I can click on the reactor stabilizer and it comes up like this. Now, if I delete this, you see the reactor core goes really, really small, and it says invalid setup. If I then put it down, oops, it now says status offline. And the fuel in and chaos out bits come up. So to fuel it, you use awakened draconium. Don't worry, it's very efficient, and it can only take 8 blocks at a time. When you put that in, the charge button appears. Don't press it yet. So you have the temperature, core temperature. It needs about 2,000 temperature to get started, but at about 8,000 and after that, it will start heating up incredibly, and that's when it gets a bit crazy. Containment field strength, this is at 0. If it does reach 0 when it's on, meltdown will occur. This is quite literally a containment field. So you want to make sure this is not at 0. The way the containment shield works is, the higher it is, obviously the safer things are. However, the lower you bring it down, the more efficient your reactor will become. But it gives you less wiggle room, of course, for how much power you can make. So there's risk and reward, if you will. We are going to go in these in more detail later. Energy saturation. Basically, the way this works is we're actually going to be injecting energy into the reactor, and it saturates the core with energy, and it turns that energy into more energy, basically. So the more saturated it is, the more energy you're pumping into the reactor. And when you actually pull out of the reactor, you're actually taking away from the saturation. The reaction will then speed up and try and replace the missing energy. So how much energy the reactor is producing is actually represented by something called a generation rate. The higher the saturation, the lower the generation rate. Because, remember, the lower the saturation, the more it's going to go, oh gosh, I need to get more saturated, and it will try and make more energy. So the lower the saturation, the higher the generation rate will be to get that saturation back up. The higher the saturation, the lower your generation rate will be. It's quite complex, obviously, whenever you're talking about nuclear reactors in a mod in Minecraft, so I'm hoping I'm making this clear as possible. Additionally, though, the higher the generation rate, so the more it's generating to fill up that saturation, the higher the temperature is going to get. And then we have fuel conversion or fuel consumption. This tells us how much fuel we've got left, or how much fuel has been actually converted into chaos energy. And it's pretty much the most important number. It's basically telling you how much fuel is being spent per tick on keeping the reactor going. A perfectly stabilized reactor burns, nothing, basically a tick. The longer the reactor stays at, a certain power output, the more the temperature is going to rise, meaning that more power is going to get generated, the hotter it is. But since it's a constant output, that excess goes into saturation, lowering how much is generated. And then that's going to lower the fuel conversion rate. Means that the longer it stays balanced, the longer it lasts without needing to be refueled. So a little bit complex, but there we go. So how do we get energy into there? Well, you pump it in with a reactor energy injector, and you put that on a different axis. So I've put it below. You could have it above if you want. You could also have these kind of below and above and, left and right, and then have the injector over here and over there sort of thing. It's up to you, as long as we're all on the same axis. So, Y, Z, X axis of the core. So I've put the reactor energy injector down, and then beneath it, I have a flux gate. So the injector is what injects energy into the core. However, the flux gate is what puts in and out of your reactor. So the injector is part of the reactor, and then we've got a flux gate. So you can see here, this one is pointing in. So from this mechanism creative energy cube, I'm pushing in to my reactor. And then over here, I've got a flux gate pushing out of my reactor. So what you'll see here is an orange and a blue side, or some versions it's purple. Purple is obviously where you're putting in. I mean, the arrow makes it pretty damn obvious. And orange is where we're outputting to. So if I wanted to put my flux gate here, what I would do is I would just do it from above, and it'll place it up. Whereas if I'm looking at, I do it here, it faces sideways. So depends what side you're doing it. So just depending on which way you're facing will depend on which way you place the flux gate. I wish there was a thing. You could probably use a wrench. But there's no way to turn it around in the UI. So if you're thinking, how do I turn it around? It just depends on which way you place it here versus placing it like that, for example. Now, the interesting thing about the flux gate is if you're a redstone whiz, this is going to be really useful for you. I can say, if the redstone signal is high, what RF tick do I want to do? 100. So if there's a high redstone tick, in fact, I'm going to put a 0. So on here, this lever is off, right? So there's no redstone, or there's a low redstone. So I'm saying flow through 100,000 RF a tick, because the redstone is low right now. And then I'm saying 0, apply. If I press apply to redstone signal high, nothing happens. But if I flip the lever, so now it's getting a high redstone response, now it's telling you the flow is 0. So basically it's saying, if there's low to no redstone, what flow of energy would you like me to provide? If there's a high redstone signal, what flow of energy would you like me to provide? Now you can also use these potentiometers on here, which is it's basically a redstone signal, and you can click on there which redstone signal you'd like to apply, how high it is. But, so you could do some really cool redstone setups with this. So obviously this is going out of the reactor, and this flux gate is going into the reactor. Now, there is a huge energy storage system you can pump into from Draconic Evolution, but that's another chapter in the series. But that is pretty much your reactor ready to go. So 4 stabilizers, put the core in the middle, make sure it's on the same axis. Injector goes on another axis, have a flux gate pointing into it with obviously energy going into it from somewhere, and then a flux gate on one of the stabilizers going out of the reactor. Before we get any further, I want to let you know that I'm partnering up with G-Portal here to give you 10% off your first month with them. They do all sorts of Minecraft servers, whether you want modded, Spigot, Sponge, anything you want. And you can swap out not just Minecraft, but any game on your server at the click of a button with GameCloud. Meaning the possibilities are endless. Again, check out the link in the description so you can get some money off with code Javier. So once you're ready and you've got all of this set up, we can go into the reactor, you've put the Awakened Draconium in, and you can press charge. Now, when you do press charge, there is also going to be a shutdown button where you can shut down the reactor if it all goes wrong, and an SAS, a semi-automated shutdown. When enabled, it will automatically initiate shutdown if the temperature drops below 2500 degrees and the saturation reaches 99%. This can be used to automatically shut down your reactor in the event of a malfunction, or just when it needs to be refueled, because if that saturation reaches 100 and it's still pumping energy in, it's just going to get hotter and things go kaboom, baby. So we need to be warming up the reactor. As you can see right now, we are saying if the redstone signal is low, we want 0 flow, so I'm going to turn my lever off. That is going to then shoot energy from the injector. It's going to start shooting it into the reactor at the rate I've put. So I'm saying 100,000 RF per tick. The containment shields will automatically turn on, as you can see here. And when we go into the reactor, you can see the containment shield strength is going up, which is obviously a good thing. Once it gets to about 50%, that is where you're going to want it. And we also want the energy saturation to reach about 50%. We also want the core temperature to get to about 2,000 degrees, and that's when your reactor is basically charged and ready to go. So containment field strength 50%, energy saturation 50%, and then 2,000 core temperature. Now the temperature is going to go up once the saturation starts going up, etc. And of course, you know, down here in my flux gate, I could say maybe I want 200,000 redstone flux going in. So basically what's going to happen is 3 stages of this charge up, right? Because this is all energy. So it's going to put energy into the containment field strength, as you can see, 50%. Then it's going to put your 50%, so 500 million, into energy saturation. And once it reaches that 50%, it's then going to start getting hotter and hotter and hotter and heating up the energy in here. And as you can see, the core temperature of the reactor is rising. And you can see here the reactor is changing color as it gets hotter, etc. It's very, very cool. So remember, we want to get it to 2,000 degrees. So we're nearly there. And it's reached 2,000 core temperature. Now it will stop at this point because it is charged and ready to go. And what we can now do is press activate and activate our reactor. And, oh my God. As you can see here, the containment shield goes down to 0 and everything goes very, very badly. So you do need to be careful how much energy you are pumping into this thing and kind of incrementally add more and more power to it, or just test it in creative and test out different power amounts, etc., until you can get it stable. So as you can see here, it will say explosion imminent. Emergency shield reserve is now active, but it won't last long. There's no way to stop the overload. The stabilizers are fried. I suggest you run, and it will give you an estimated time until detonation. So that is what will happen if you do let it melt down. So one thing to note on the containment field, the stronger the field is, the more RF you need to keep it at that level. Once it has calculated it, you can see here we have an estimated time until detonation. So I know that in 100 seconds, it's all going to go kaboom. And I will obviously show you how crazy it gets. And there we go. This is what an actual explosion looks like when it happens. This is the meltdown. So I want to show you, this is obviously what you don't want to happen. And basically, when it does go off, this is what you're left with. So this is the crater here. Of course, the traveling trader still managed to survive it. Of course he would. Now, this is going to take a while even to actually get going. But yes, this is what the crater looks like if you let it melt down. And if you're thinking, oh, it's not that big, if we actually keep going out, you will see that it isn't just the crater that is affected, but actually a huge swath of land up to what looks like about here has been affected. So it's about this far out. You know, it's an absolutely ungodly amount of land. If you wanted your base to be in a sort of wasteland, this is actually a great way to do it. You could do that and then put your base in the crater, make a really cool base, to be fair, but not something I'm personally going to do. And you can literally see in the ocean where it has like caused, you know, such an explosion. It has literally wiped out like half the ocean here, and it's just like a complete mess. You know, the leaves off these trees at the outside have all been burnt off. Yeah, it's mad. So what I'm now going to show you is how you do it, how to do it correctly. And what I'm going to show you is a really good reactor setup that you can use to output up to about 8 million power per tick. You do need somewhere for this power to go, though, so do be, you know, aware of that, of course. But this is going to be a really stable reactor that is really, really safe. So let's start off from 0. We've set up the reactor. We're going to charge it up. What I want you to do is get your flux gate going in and set the high redstone signal to 1.2 million. So we're going to input 1.2 million redstone flux per tick and have low to 0, meaning it's at 0 because the lever is off. On your output one, put it to 2.5 million. So input 1.2 million, output 2.5 million. And we want to turn this off as well. So it's at 0. Okay, so they're both at 0. Just to check, this is at 1.2 million. I'm going to turn it on. And then I'm going to say, oh, put the fuel in. Would help. Put the fuel in, turn it on, and press charge. The containment field strength is going to whiz up to 50% very quickly. The energy saturation is going to, well, it's going to get there. It's going to get there eventually. And while charging it, you could up the input rate. Just don't forget to turn it back down. But it's going to take like a minute. I would just leave it at 1.2 million input. There we go, 50% energy saturation. And the core temperature is going to whiz up to 2000 to core temperature. And there we go, it's warming up. What I now want you to do is leave the input at 1.2 million and leave the output at 0. This is going to let the reactor stabilize itself. So I'm going to say activate. And what you're going to see here is that the energy saturation whizzes up, as will the containment field strength. Now it's going to get very close to 100%, and I do not want you to worry. So we're just going to wait this out to avoid a nuclear meltdown. And you can see the containment field strength is going up, and it starts slowing down around the 90% mark. At about 97%, it's noticeably slower, 98%. And on the saturation, you can see it's starting to really slow down here at 99 point whatever percentage. And really don't worry, like this is still absolutely fine. I would now say the reactor is looking pretty stable. It's about 2000 core temperature, going down extraordinarily slowly. And we're starting to sort of get really, really, really slow containment field increases. You can see here it's at 98,868, but there is absolutely no concern here that that's going to get to 100%. Not that it matters, and that was at 99.9%. And you can still see we've got a fair amount. What I'm now going to do at this point, now that it's really stable, is I'm going to flip the switch and start exporting my 2.5 million RF. And what you're going to see is the containment field rapidly dropping. And so will the saturation. Because remember, we're pulling out of that saturation. We're unsaturating it by pulling out energy at 2.5 million per tick. What you're then going to see is that the containment shield is going to start stabilizing around the 55% mark. And the core temperature is going to start rising. And as you can see here, the containment field strength is really stabilizing out around 53%. You can see it's getting a lot slower on the percentage. And about 50% this will stabilize, as will the saturation here. And the core temperature is sitting about 3000 degrees. I think that will stabilize that. It's looking pretty good. So once it has now stabilized with an input of 1.2 million and an output of 2.5 million, what you could start doing is etching up those numbers. Now, eventually, you will have to turn this off and actually refuel it with those 8 Draconian awakened blocks again. But this makes such incredible amounts of power. It really is nuts. So we're making about 2.5 million RF per tick. And as you can see, it's really, really stabilizing now. And you could start upping it. So maybe we could up it to 1.25. And I'm going to up that a little bit for the injection rate. And go, okay, it's the containment field's going up a bit now again. I could probably do a bit more than that, to be fair. I would just do it like this, 1.4 million. And then go, okay, containment field's going up. Yep, that's looking pretty good. It's not going crazy. Saturation's not going crazy. Core temperature's okay, pretty stable. And what you would do is you would sort of up it in equal increments. So maybe I'll go to 1.6 million input. It's still not going up too crazily. We're still about fine. Maybe now that I've put it up to that, I can then up this to 2.7 million output. And what you're going to do when you do that is just watch that containment field, watch that temperature, and watch that energy saturation and wait for it to stabilize. Don't start going crazy and go, woohoo! Woohoo! Energy for days! No, wait for it to stabilize every time you do this. Slow and steady wins the race. Basically, keep doing what I'm doing here, and with this setup, you can easily keep incrementally increasing this until about 8 million output, basically. And there you go. You have now got a stable Draconic reactor.